The crystalline dome of the celestial arena sparkled under the triple suns of Proxima Centauri, its translucent surfaces refracting light in mesmerizing patterns across the gathering crowd of intergalactic spectators. Marcus Riley stood at the competitor's entrance, his weathered hands adjusting the simple medkit strapped to his belt, a habit from his days as a combat medic that he couldn't shake even after 15 years of retirement. The registration official, a being composed entirely of shifting geometric patterns, regarded Marcus with what might have been curiosity. Human competitor Marcus Riley, your presence is unexpected. Humans haven't participated in the Celestial Games for 3 decades. Marcus offered a slight smile, the scars on his face crinkling. Times change, he said simply, accepting his competitor's badge, a shimming holographic disc that attached itself to his plain gray uniform. As he moved through the preparation area, Marcus couldn't help but notice how other competitors gave him a wide berth. He recognized the various species from his military briefings, the towering drachnids with their armored exoskeletons, the ethereal Lumians who seemed to float rather than walk, and the cybernetically enhanced Mechari warriors. But it was the small figure struggling with a malfunctioning gravity stabilizer that caught his attention. The young Etherian couldn't have been more than equivalent to a human teenager, their crystalline skin refracting light in weak pulses, a sign of distress in their species. Unlike the other Etherians Marcus had seen, this one's crystal formations were irregular, growing at odd angles that clearly affected their movement. Having trouble there? Marcus asked, approaching slowly to avoid startling the young alien. The Etherian looked up, their faceted eyes shifting through various colors before settling on a deep blue. I am fine, they responded, their universal translator giving their words a musical quality. The stabilizer just needs calibration. Marcus knelt down, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the device. I'm Marcus. What's your name? ZYX, they replied, their crystalline hands still fumbling with the stabilizer's controls. You are human. I have only read about your kind in historical archives. That's right. Marcus gestured to the stabilizer. May I? I've worked with similar tech during my medical service. After a moment's hesitation, ZYX nodded. Marcus examined the device, noting how it had been modified to compensate for ZYX's unique crystal growth pattern. The gravitational field is misaligned with your crystal matrix, he explained, making careful adjustments. There, try it now. ZYX took a tentative step, then another, their movement noticeably smoother. Their crystalline skin pulsed with bright gold, happiness. Thank you. But, why would you help a competitor? Before Marcus could respond, a deep, resonating voice interrupted. Because humans are weak. A massive drachnid warrior approached, his armored exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial markings. They mistake compassion for strength. I am Korax, 7-time champion of the Outer Rim sectors. This competition is no place for defective creatures or soft-hearted humans. Marcus stood slowly, positioning himself between Korax and ZYX. Strength comes in many forms, he said quietly, his gray eyes meeting Korax's compound ones without flinching. The drachnid's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or contempt. We shall see, human. The first trial begins soon, the chamber of gravity wells. It will separate the worthy from the weak. With that, Korax turned and strode away, his heavy footsteps echoing through the preparation area. ZYX's crystal skin had dulled to a worried gray. He's right. I shouldn't be here. My condition, the doctors said the irregular crystal growth is irreversible. I only qualified because the Games Committee is trying to appear more inclusive. Marcus checked the medkit at his belt, an old habit that had saved countless lives during the border wars. Let me tell you something about humans, ZYX. We've never much cared for other people's assumptions about what's possible or impossible. He offered his hand to the young Etherian. What do you say we prove them wrong together? As ZYX's crystal skin shifted to a cautiously optimistic purple, the arena's announcement system came to life, its multi-tonal harmonics alerting competitors to take their positions. The first trial of the Celestial Games was about to begin, and with it, a challenge that would test not just physical prowess, but the very nature of strength itself. The other competitors moved toward their designated starting positions, their bodies enhanced with cybernetics, shape-shifting abilities, or natural evolutionary advantages. Marcus and ZYX followed, the unlikely pair drawing curious glances and dismissive smirks. But Marcus Riley had long ago learned that victory didn't always look the way people expected it to, and sometimes the greatest triumphs came from simply refusing to accept the limitations others placed upon you. The chamber of gravity wells stretched before the competitors like a twisted dream made real. Massive crystalline pillars floated at various heights, each generating its own gravitational field that shifted in strength and direction without warning. Bridges of pure energy pulsed between the pillars, their paths flickering and changing every few seconds. Marcus studied the chamber's layout, his combat medics training automatically identifying the most dangerous zones. Beside him, ZYX's crystalline skin flickered with nervous energy, their stabilizer humming as it fought against the chamber's competing gravitational forces. "The objective is simple," announced the geometric pattern being who had registered Marcus earlier. "Reach the summit pillar and retrieve a celestial shard. The bottom 20% of competitors will be eliminated. Begin." Immediately, the other competitors launched into action. Korax used his powerful exoskeleton to leap between pillars, while the Lumians simply floated through the gravity fields as if they were nothing more than gentle breezes. The Mechari warriors activated their anti-gravity units, their cybernetic enhancements calculating optimal paths. "I can't." ZYX started, their crystal structure trembling under the strain of the conflicting gravity fields. "Yes, you can," Marcus interrupted firmly. "Look at me. What do you see in the pattern of the gravity wells?" ZYX's faceted eyes studied the chamber. They pulse. Like heartbeats." Marcus smiled. "Exactly. Just like your crystal matrix. The fields aren't random, they're rhythmic. We can use that." He pointed to the nearest pillar. "See how the energy bridge flares brighter just before the gravity shift? That's our timer." Working together, they began their ascent. Marcus taught ZYX to read the patterns, timing their movements with the pulses of the gravity wells. When ZYX's stabilizer struggled with particularly strong fields, Marcus used his own body as an anchor, sharing his weight distribution techniques from zero-gravity combat training. Above them, the competition grew fierce. Two Mechari warriors collided in mid-air, their cybernetic systems temporarily scrambled by the interference. A Lumian miscalculated a gravity shift and was caught in a cross-current, their ethereal form tumbling until they managed to stabilize. "Why are you slowing yourself down for me?" ZYX asked during a brief rest on a stable pillar. "You could reach the summit much faster alone." Marcus checked ZYX's stabilizer, making a minor adjustment. "Back in the border wars, I learned something important. The soldiers who tried to be heroes, who rushed ahead alone. They weren't usually the ones who made it. But the units that stuck together, that made sure everyone got home. They accomplished things that should have been impossible." A shadow fell over them. Korax landed on their pillar, his massive form causing the crystal surface to vibrate. "Touching," he rumbled, mandibles clicking. "But this is not your human war, medic. This is the Celestial Games, where only individual strength matters." He gestured to the summit pillar, where several competitors had already claimed their shards. "Your compassion will be your downfall." Marcus stood, positioning himself between Korax and ZYX once again. "You're right about one thing, this isn't war. In war, we fight against each other. But this?" He gestured to the chamber around them. "This is a challenge. And in my experience, the greatest challenges are best faced together." Korax's compound eyes studied them for a long moment. "Your species has always been puzzling. Very well, human. Show me this, together. To their surprise, he didn't leap away but instead watched as Marcus helped ZYX prepare for the next gravity shift. They continued their ascent, moving steadily if not quickly. Marcus noticed something interesting: their methodical approach was drawing attention. Other competitors began timing their jumps to the gravity pulses, and several copied their technique of using the energy bridge flares as countdown markers. As they neared the summit, a massive surge rippled through the chamber. One of the Mercury's cybernetic enhancements had overloaded, sending out an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the gravity wells. Chaos erupted as competitors found their carefully planned routes suddenly destabilized. Hold on. Marcus grabbed ZYX as their pillar's gravity field fluctuated wildly. The young Etherean's crystal structure began to resonate dangerously with the unstable energy. Then something unexpected happened. Corax, who had been following them, reached out with his armored limb. Your technique for reading the patterns, use it now, he commanded. Working together, human, Etherean, and Drachnid, they navigated through the disruption. Marcus's experience with field injuries helped him stabilize ZYX's crystal resonance, while Corax's strength provided an anchor against the wild gravity fluctuations. When they finally reached the summit pillar, they found themselves among the last competitors to claim their shards, but they had made it, and they had made it together. As the chamber's field stabilized and the trial ended, Marcus noticed something had changed. The other competitors no longer avoided him. Instead, many watched him with what seemed like curiosity or reassessment. ZYX's crystal skin glowed with pride, not just from completing the trial but from having proved their worth. Even Corax seemed different. Perhaps, the massive warrior admitted grudgingly, there is something to be learned from human methods after all. Though do not expect me to become soft, he added quickly. Marcus checked his medkit out of habit, smiling slightly. Wouldn't dream of it. But the next trial is coming soon, and something tells me we haven't faced our biggest challenge yet. He didn't know how right he was. As they left the chamber, none of them noticed the slight instability in the energy bridges, nor the way certain crystal pillars had begun to show microscopic fractures. The chamber of gravity wells had been changed by their passage, and those changes would soon test them in ways none of them could predict. The preparation chamber before the third trial hummed with nervous energy. Marcus watched as maintenance drones scurried across the arena's outer walls, their scanning beams revealing hairline fractures in the crystal structure, damage from the earlier gravity well disruptions. His medical training had taught him to notice small details that others might miss, and something about those fractures made him uneasy. The third trial will test your adaptability, announced the chief administrator, their geometric form shifting into complex patterns of anticipation. Welcome to the resonance chamber. The arena transformed around them. The walls became transparent, revealing the vast starfield beyond Proxima Centauri's triple suns. Crystalline platforms materialized, each emitting a different frequency that created visible waves in the air. The competitors would need to navigate these sonic patterns while maintaining their balance on increasingly unstable surfaces. Each platform resonates at a unique frequency, the administrator continued. Touch the wrong one at the wrong time, and the sonic feedback could be unfortunate. Only the top 10 competitors will advance. ZYX's crystal structure trembled slightly, picking up the surrounding frequencies. The vibrations, they're similar to the patterns we learned in the gravity wells, but more complex. Marcus nodded, noting how the young Ethereans' irregular crystal growth actually seemed to give them a unique sensitivity to the sonic waves. You can feel the harmonics better than any of us. Let that be your strength. Nearby, Corax adjusted his exoskeleton's sensitivity. The human speaks wisdom, young one. My people were warriors before we learned to be observers. Today, perhaps we can be both. The trial began. Immediately, the chamber filled with a symphony of sonic frequencies as competitors leaped from platform to platform. 2 Mercury warriors took an early lead, their cybernetic systems rapidly calculating safe paths. The Lumians struggled, their ethereal forms disrupted by the competing sound waves. Marcus, ZYX, and Corax moved as a unit, with ZYX reading the sonic patterns, Marcus translating them into safe pathways, and Corax providing stability when the frequencies grew too intense. Their teamwork drew murmurs from the spectators. Never had the celestial games seen such diverse species working in genuine cooperation. Then everything went wrong. A deep tremor ran through the arena's structure. The maintenance drones suddenly went into emergency mode, their scanning beams turning red. The fractures from the gravity well trial had weakened the crystal walls more than anyone had realized. Emergency protocol initiated, the administrator announced, their geometric form turning a warning crimson. All competitors must. They never finished. With a sound like shattering glass, a section of the arena's outer wall cracked. The vacuum of space pulled at them, held back only by emergency force fields that flickered ominously. Chaos erupted. The sonic platforms began to destabilize, their frequencies going haywire. Several competitors activated emergency teleporters, disappearing in flashes of light. Others scrambled for the nearest exits. The force fields won't hold long, Marcus shouted over the cacophony of alarms. He could see the strain in the emergency systems, another detail others might miss. We need to. A massive sonic pulse from a malfunctioning platform cut him off. The wave hit ZYX directly, sending the young Etherian into resonant shock. Their crystal structure began to fracture, spiderweb cracks appearing across their surface. No. Marcus rushed to ZYX's side, his medkit already in hand. But this wasn't like patching up plasma burns or setting broken bones. Etherian crystal degradation could be fatal if not treated properly. Corax landed beside them, his exoskeleton sensors scanning the deteriorating situation. The exit points are cut off. We have perhaps 2 minutes before total structural failure. Marcus's mind raced. The medical nanites in his kit might help stabilize ZYX's crystal structure, but they weren't designed for Etherian physiology. Using them would be risky. Yet doing nothing would be fatal. Trust me, he said to ZYX, whose faceted eyes had dulled to a dangerous gray. Remember how we read the patterns together. Focus on that. Feel the resonance and try to match it. As Marcus prepared the nanites, Corax did something unexpected. He adjusted his exoskeleton to emit a counter-frequency, helping to stabilize the sonic chaos around them. Your ways are not our ways, human, the Drachnid warrior rumbled, but today they may be what saves us. Working together, they fought against time. Marcus administered the nanites while monitoring ZYX's crystal integrity. Corax maintained the protective sonic barrier, his mighty exoskeleton straining against the competing frequencies. And ZYX, drawing on everything they had learned, fought to align their fractured crystal structure with the stabilizing resonance. Around them, the arena continued to deteriorate. The force fields flickered more frequently now, and the remaining competitors had either evacuated or were trapped in other sections. The maintenance drones zipped frantically between failing systems, their repair attempts growing increasingly futile. It's working, Marcus announced as ZYX's crystal structure began to stabilize. But we're not out of danger yet. The nanites need time to fully integrate, and we're running out of. Another tremor shook the chamber. Above them, a massive crystal support beam groaned ominously. They looked up just in time to see it break free, plummeting toward their position with the inexorable force of destiny. Time seemed to slow as the crystal beam plummeted toward them. Marcus's combat-trained reflexes screamed at him to dive for safety, but moving ZYX in their fragile state could shatter their newly stabilizing crystal structure. In that fraction of a second, he made his choice, bracing himself over the young Etherian as a human shield. But the impact never came. A grunt of exertion made Marcus look up. Corax stood above them, his exoskeleton servos whining in protest as he held the massive beam at bay. Your methods are infectious, human, the Drachnid warrior managed through clenched mandibles. This, protecting others, it has a certain appeal. The beam's weight was too much for even Corax's enhanced strength. His armored legs began to buckle, the crystal floor beneath him cracking under the pressure. Then something remarkable happened. ZYX's faceted eyes suddenly blazed with light. The young Etherean's crystal structure, still saturated with Marcus's medical nanites, began to emit a harmonic frequency that matched the arena's resonance perfectly. The falling beam's crystal composition responded, its downward momentum slowing as it synchronized with the stabilizing frequency. The patterns! ZYX exclaimed, their voice stronger now. Everything here is crystal, the beam, the arena, even me. We can use the resonance like we did in the trials. Marcus understood immediately. Corax, adjust your exoskeleton's sonic emitters to match ZYX's frequency. I'll reconfigure the nanites to amplify the effect. Working in perfect synchronization, they transformed their crisis into an opportunity. Corax's strength and technological enhancement provided the raw power, ZYX's natural crystal affinity guided the resonance, and Marcus's medical expertise ensured the delicate balance required for the procedure. The falling beam not only stopped but began to reintegrate with the arena's structure, the nanites facilitating a molecular bonding that was stronger than the original configuration. Other damaged sections of the arena started responding to the harmonic pattern, critical systems stabilizing one by one. Emergency response teams finally broke through the sealed chambers, expecting to find disaster. Instead, they discovered something unprecedented. 3 competitors from vastly different species had not only survived but had begun to repair the arena itself. As medical drones swarmed around them, running diagnostic scans, Marcus noticed something had fundamentally changed. The remaining competitors who had stayed to help with evacuations were looking at them differently, not with the usual competitive assessment, but with something approaching respect. The geometric administrator materialized nearby, their form cycling through patterns that suggested both relief and confusion. The Celestial Games have never seen anything like this. The protocols for such a situation are unclear. Then perhaps, rumbled Corax, his exoskeleton still humming with the stabilizing frequency, it is time for new protocols. ZYX, their crystal structure now glowing with a healthy iridescence, turned to Marcus. You could have teleported to safety when the crisis began. Why did you stay? Marcus checked his now depleted medkit, a small smile crossing his weathered face. Because that's not who we are. Humans learned long ago that true strength isn't about surviving alone, it's about making sure everyone makes it through together. The administrator's geometric patterns shifted rapidly as they processed this concept. The Games Committee must convene to discuss these events. This unprecedented cooperation between species, it changes everything. Good, said Marcus firmly. Because I think we've all seen today that the old ways of doing things, of measuring strength purely through competition, need to evolve. Corax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Among my people, change comes slowly. We believe that tradition gives us strength. But today has taught me that perhaps the strongest tradition we can have is learning to adapt. As maintenance crews began the formal repair process, Marcus watched ZYX demonstrating their crystal resonance techniques to fascinated emergency workers. The young Etherean's irregular crystal growth, once seen as a disability, had proved to be the key to saving lives. The final trial was scheduled for tomorrow, the administrator noted, their form still showing signs of uncertainty. However, given the damage to the arena and these unusual circumstances. The final trial has already happened, Marcus interrupted gently. It just didn't look like what anyone expected. He gazed around the chamber, taking in the scene. Emergency teams of various species worked seamlessly together, applying the resonance techniques they discovered. Competitors who had stayed behind were helping with repairs, their previous rivalries forgotten in the face of a greater purpose. Look around, he continued. Different species combining their unique abilities to solve problems. Strength being measured not by individual achievement but by collective success. Isn't that a greater challenge than any planned trial could have been? The administrator's patterns briefly aligned into a shape that suggested deep contemplation. Perhaps, Marcus Riley, you have shown us that the true purpose of the Celestial Games was never about finding the strongest competitor, but about discovering new ways to be strong. 1 year later, the Celestial Arena looked very different. Gone were the purely competitive challenge chambers, replaced by hybrid zones that tested both individual skill and cooperative ability. The once segregated viewing areas now hosted mixed-species audiences, and the preparation chambers had been redesigned to encourage interaction between competitors. Marcus stood in the new training hall, watching ZYX instruct a group of young athletes from various species. The young Etherian's crystal structure gleamed with confidence as they demonstrated how to read resonance patterns. Their once problematic irregular crystal growth had become recognized as a gift, offering unique insights into the fundamental harmonics that connected all crystalline structures. The newest batch of students shows promise, rumbled a familiar voice. Korax approached, his exoskeleton now bearing the markings of a master instructor rather than a pure warrior. The Drachnid had surprised everyone by becoming one of the strongest advocates for the game's new direction. They're learning more than just techniques, Marcus observed, noting how a young Mechari was helping a Lumian understand the relationship between cybernetic frequencies and natural resonance. They're learning to see differences as advantages rather than weaknesses. The geometric administrator materialized nearby, their patterns showing satisfaction. The committee's latest report confirms what we're seeing. Applications for the games have tripled, with participants now coming from species that previously considered themselves unsuited for competition. Marcus smiled, touching the medallion he wore, not a victory token, but a symbol of the new Unity initiative that had grown from their actions during last year's crisis. The medal was unique, crafted from a fusion of materials representing different species, Etherian crystal, Drachnid alloy, and earth metals, all harmoniously combined. Mentor Riley. A young Drachnid trainee approached, their exoskeleton still showing signs of recent injury. I've been practicing the medical nanite harmonics you taught us. Watch. They generated a gentle resonance field that caused their damaged armor to begin self-repairing. Excellent progress, Marcus praised, sharing a knowing look with Korax. A year ago, the idea of a Drachnid warrior studying healing techniques would have been unthinkable. Now it was becoming commonplace. ZYX finished their lesson and joined them, their crystal structure pulsing with proud colors. The medical council approved our proposal, they announced excitedly. The crystal resonance therapy will be implemented in hospitals across the galaxy. They say it could revolutionize treatment for dozens of species. The innovation had grown from their experience during the crisis. Marcus's medical nanites, combined with ZYX's natural crystal harmonics and Korax's exoskeleton technology, had led to breakthroughs in healing techniques that worked across species barriers. Your mother would be proud, Marcus told ZYX softly. He remembered how the young Etherian had spoken of her, a scientist who had always believed her child's unique crystal structure might someday prove valuable. The administrator's patterns shifted to indicate an incoming announcement. Attention everyone. The registration for the first Junior Unity Games is now open. We already have applicants from 57 species, including several that have never participated in any intergalactic event before. Marcus watched as excited chatter spread through the training hall. The Junior Games had been ZYX's idea, a competition specifically designed to show young athletes that their unique characteristics, even those traditionally seen as limitations, could be sources of strength. Did you ever imagine this? Korax asked, gesturing to the scene before them. When you first arrived here, did you think your human methods would change the game so fundamentally? Marcus shook his head. I came here because humanity had isolated itself for too long. I thought maybe showing a different kind of strength might help rebuild some bridges. I never expected. He paused, watching a group of young competitors from traditionally rival species working together to solve a resonance puzzle. You never expected that the true victory would not be in the competition itself, ZYX finished for him, their crystal facets reflecting the light in patterns that seemed to dance. But in showing us all a better way to compete. The administrator's geometric form suddenly displayed unusual patterns. Marcus Riley, the committee has a request. The opening ceremony of the Junior Games needs a speaker, someone who can explain to the young competitors what these new games truly represent. Marcus started to demur, but Korax placed a massive armored hand on his shoulder. They need to understand, old friend. They need to hear from the one who showed us that true strength often comes disguised as kindness. Looking around the training hall one more time, Marcus saw the legacy they had built together. He saw it in the proud stance of a young athlete with non-standard cybernetics, in the determined expression of a species once considered too physically frail to compete, in the harmonious cooperation between beings who once would have seen each other only as rivals. Very well, he agreed. But I won't speak alone. This story belongs to all of us. As they moved toward the ceremony planning area, Marcus reflected on how far they'd come. The Celestial Games had been transformed, yes, but more importantly, they had helped transform perceptions across the galaxy. Species that once measured themselves against each other now measured their success by how well they could work together. The old saying claimed that victory had many fathers, but this victory, this evolution, truly belonged to everyone who had dared to believe in a different kind of strength. It belonged to a young Etherean who turned their supposed weakness into a gift, to a proud warrior who learned that adaptation was the greatest strength of all, and to every competitor who now understood that the most meaningful victories were those achieved together. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all, that sometimes the most profound changes come not from grand gestures or dramatic showdowns, but from simple acts of kindness, from the choice to reach out instead of standing apart, from the courage to see beyond traditional boundaries and imagine a better way forward. The future of the Celestial Games, and perhaps of intergalactic cooperation itself, would be built on this foundation. And as Marcus watched the next generation of competitors preparing to carry this legacy forward, he knew that this was just the beginning.